We'll call the June 8th meeting to order, meeting between the Lycoming County Commissioners and the Planning Commission regarding a honey preserve use. It's a public meeting. Overview of the hunting preserve timeline.
That's going to be Tom.
So I'm going to go over a brief summary of essentially how we came up with the ordinance. So last summer we were approached by an individual who had expressed interest in developing his property for hunting preserve use. After reviewing the ordinance, it became clear that we did not currently provide for the use in the county zoning ordinance, and that we needed to make an amendment to the zoning ordinance. We discussed it at the August Planning Commission meeting, and an ad hoc committee was designated to discuss the proposed amendments. We also contacted representatives with the Department of Agriculture and Game Commission to see how these uses were already regulated. Ordinance language was drafted after we received feedback from the ad hoc committee, and the proposed language was presented at a public meeting held on October 24th. This meeting was advertised, and all partner municipalities were invited to attend so that they could provide us with feedback on the proposed amendment. The ordinance amendment was presented at the November 21st Planning Commission meeting and was recommended for approval to the commissioners. The amendment was sent to our partner municipalities for review and comment as required by the ordinance, and all municipalities who responded indicated that they had no comments on the proposed amendment. The amendment was presented at the January 23rd public hearing, which was attended by a neighbor of a potential future applicant who expressed concern related to the proposed ordinance and the inclusion of the use in the countryside district. The final decision on the amendment was tabled for future discussion. The planning department conducted an additional analysis on density in the proposed districts. The analysis indicated that there were parts of all three districts which could support a hunting preserve use, but also that there were parts of all three districts where a hunting preserve use could negatively impact the neighborhood. Due to problems with COVID, the public hearing was postponed until May 12th. After hearing from constituents, the commissioners decided at that meeting to have the ordinance amended to remove the proposed use from the countryside and agricultural zoning district. The amendment was re-advertised for June 11th to allow the use in the resource protection district only.
And we did at the November meeting of the Planning Commission, we did make some revisions based upon the next door neighbor's comments. One, we increased the distance and the possibility for the zoning hearing board to actually increase that based upon safety issues dependent upon each site-specific application, and we also added a few other minor tweaks.
Shannon, I just want to add to regards to this statement. Commissioners voted on it, but it was a 2-to-1 vote.
Right. Correct.
I voted against the having.
Right.
Okay.
If it's okay, I'm going to go over what the actual zoning district requirements are. So basically, it's to establish a commercial hunting and trapping or other operation of a game preserve. The supplemental controls will include that in order to do this, you must have at least 100 contiguous acres for the operation. It cannot be divided by any public or private rights of ways intended for the conveyance of automobiles. Unless you are a hunting ground, which is for bird types of hunting, you must have the entire preserve operation surrounded by a fence of sufficient height to prevent the animals from leaving. Additionally, the fence must be either extended 2 feet below ground, or it must be 2 feet above ground, must be electrified to prevent animals from burrowing or getting underneath the fence.
Let's see, one thing to
Sure,
that.
go ahead.
Is that what the ordinance is? Because I know that I asked that it be put in there that it be and or something equal to or sufficient of.
We did not add the and or. It is and or 2 feet below or electrification. It was
That
not.
wasn't what we agreed on.
Because we've talked about the concrete.
we talked about that, but we never added it at the meeting. Talked about that.
Because that doesn't make any sense, just be honest, I don't know why if we talked about it, it wouldn't be in the meeting, but
It wasn't, the language wasn't amended to include that.
it should be amended to change that to and/or, because if somebody wants to put concrete in the ground and attach the chain link fence to the top of the concrete, they should be allowed to do that. Because that's your and/or. There's other ways to do things other than the two ways that you guys have it in there.
The enclosure for the commercial hunting shall be erected at least 450 feet from a neighboring residence, any neighboring agricultural buildings used to house livestock, a school, daycare facility, or playground associated with school. Commercial hunting operations shall not undertake activities between hours of sunset and sunrise. The owner-operator will show proof that any and all required federal, state, and local licenses and permits have been obtained. A hunting preserve may construct with appropriate zoning approvals a principal building for the conduction of business related to the operation as well as for lodging and guests of the preserve. Lodging facilities shall not be open to customers other than the patrons of the hunting preserve and must follow the requirements listed in the other parts of the ordinance. A hunting preserve may also construct with appropriate zoning and permit approvals an accessory structure for the purpose of butchering game animals killed within the hunting preserve.
Could you repeat that, please?
A hunting preserve may also construct with appropriate zoning permit approvals an accessory structure for the purposes of butchering game animals killed within the hunting preserve. A general site plan is required. This is something that we added at the November meeting, especially. The requirement for a general site plan, the site plan shall show all primary structures and any structures used to house livestock within 1,000 feet of the proposed game preserve area. The idea behind these requirements is so that the zoning hearing board can look at the safety of everybody within the surrounding area and take that into account when they're adding special conditions upon each individual application. Because every single property is going to have different elevations, going to have different landscaping and or have a different impact on the surrounding area. So this would be where the zoning hearing board will look at the site plan and determine, okay, we have these buildings here or in this direction, and this will be how we're going to write this permit if it's allowed.
Topography will pay it.
Yes.
I don't think that we all understand. We have this document in front of us that she's reading from.
Yeah.
It's the ordinance 2020-01, and she's reading from the supplemental, which is page 3 of the document.
Yeah, this is actually, these are the minimum standards that you have to meet. But the reason that this was done this way is because this is allowed only by special exception. Therefore, when you have to go to the zoning hearing board, and the zoning hearing board will look at the site plan, and they will determine, okay, there are these safety issues based upon the current conditions at this property itself. Because everything, as we've discussed over the last so many months, every district could have something in it, but also every district would not have every land be appropriate for that certain use. So you have to look at everything individually, especially with this type of use, which involves firearms and other issues. We've also looked at, Tom and the ad hoc committee had also looked at the other state requirements. There are certain things that Department of Ag takes care of, such as getting rid of the dead animals if they're not going to be butchered and things like that. There's other standards that we can't regulate what types of animals are coming in. We also, if it's a hunting grounds, which is regulated by the Game Commission, that doesn't have to be fenced because that's for birds. So there's a whole bunch of other things that we can't really control, but what we can control are the safety issues, and that's what we've tried to do in this amendment. Does anybody have any questions on the actual amendment?
Move on to discussion.
Can I just,
I'm curious of why we're here.
well, I think we're here to try to have a discussion. We had a little bit of a discussion on the phone, but I just want to explain to you where I am coming from in terms of the reason why I voted the way I did. You know, zoning is always a very important thing to people because they go to a community with an expectation of a certain quality of life or lifestyle that they have. And in this case, this change affects obviously only those municipalities that are participating in county zoning. So if someone wants to put a hunting preserve into a municipality that's not part of county zoning, which there are many of, there are more of them than there are, there's what, 18 or 20 in county zoning?
21.
21. So there are 21 municipalities in county zoning, and there are approximately 31, 52 municipalities in the county, plus, so about 31 that are not in county zoning. So this will not affect them at all. So the point I'm saying making that is there's a lot of area to do a hunting preserve outside the county zoning. So focusing in only on the county zoning, people who opted to be part of county zoning, the municipalities opted for a certain quality of life or a certain way they wanted it. And I asked Shannon to pass out to you what is called Establishment of Zoning Districts, which is from our zoning ordinance. And if you look at this document, it describes to people what they can reasonably expect to have in the community in which they are going to live on the zoning. So on page 7, it says Resource Protection District. Now, I am betting that this was put together at about the time the county zoning went into effect, which was probably 30-odd years ago. Okay, on page 7, it says very specifically under Resource Protection District that an example of what you might expect if you choose to live in resource protection is private hunting / fishing preserves. Okay? And if you go down to the agricultural district, it clearly says in the very first line that the purpose of the agricultural district is to maintain, preserve, and protect the areas of Lycoming County that are predominantly in agricultural use. And around the 5th line, it says, as a matter of policy, it's hereby determined that the highest and best use of this land is agriculture. So there's clearly an effort to protect the agricultural districts and to keep them as agricultural. And if you go down to Countryside District, it says in the very first line that this is designed to permit residential development. If you go down about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines after that, it says opportunities with suitable infrastructure without severe environmental constraints. So the reason I bring this to our attention is because, to me, this is an extremely important document. It lays out for the public who are buying land and settling in those areas and building houses and doing whatever, that this is a reasonable expectation of what they should have. Now, does that mean that that may change, never change? No. Obviously, things change, and if you didn't have changes, you would have a community that's static. However, I would submit that part of our responsibility as, certainly I see as my responsibility as a commissioner, is to make sure that when we make a serious change to a document like a zoning ordinance that impacts people's quality of life and investments that may make, that we make it as narrowly as possible. And honestly, if you do some research on zoning ordinances and changing zoning ordinances, they talk about language of making changes narrow as opposed to very broad and sweeping. So the reason that the amendment was proposed to have it in resource protection only is to make a narrow change and then see whether subsequent to that there's a need for additional. You know, there's a question that's been raised about whether or not this is too narrow. And obviously you can't write a zoning ordinance that makes it so narrow that you can't actually do the use. Okay? If you do that, that's really a violation of the law. But I actually think that this is not a narrow, because if you look at how many, and I think they gave this to you tonight, how many acres of land there are where you can do this in resource protection, there are approximately 155,000 acres of private acreage. This is the sheet that was given. And it's 2,803 parcels. So that means that if I want to do a hunting preserve, I can go out and find 155,000 acres and over 2,000 parcels, someone to buy land from to do this. I want to give you a comparison in the existing zoning ordinance book. You go to page 12 and 13 of the zoning ordinance. There are uses for which there are literally 3 parcels. Page 13, uses restricted only to industrial. Our industrial parcels in county zoning are Marcellus Energy Park, Piatt Township, and Porter Township, the old Woolrich building. If I want to do adult entertainment, I have to do it in the industrial district. And basically, I have to do it in urban industrial. And basically, am I correct that there are 3 parcels in urban industrial?
Not parcels, 3 zoning districts.
3 zoning districts. Do you have any parcels there are?
There are 65 parcels in the industrial zone.
65, but here's my point. In resource protection, there are over 2,000 parcels. In industrial, I've got to find one of 65 people. Okay, skip the adult entertainment, because that sometimes doesn't get too much sympathy for people. Disposal business, a junkyard, can only be done in industrial. Growers and processors of marijuana, and I'm talking about medical marijuana, which is legal in this state. Only an industrial zoning district, again, limited to 65. And if I want to have a dispensary of medical marijuana, it's only allowed in suburban mixed. I guess my point is that we are not, by putting it in resource protection only, drawing too narrow an area for someone who wants to go to do it. Did you want
When the ad hoc committee was put together, we discussed sizes, and parcels, and different townships. In resource protection, of that total acreage in resource protection, 42% of that's state forest. So that's off limits to a hunting preserve.
Yeah,
It's
but-
off limits.
okay.
Can't be used for hunting.
Absolutely, but
Preserve.
this document is private.
No, I understand. We're looking at the same thing.
Well, 155,000 acres is private.
I understand that.
Okay.
That's 45% of the resource protection.
Right,
Period.
so there's over
Okay.
300,000 acres of resource protection.
There's 341,000, yes.
Okay, okay.
But 42% of that's gotta come off, right off the top.
Right.
You can't use it. So we're down to about 58% left of RP to be used. Then look at what fits the criteria that we've laid out in acreage size, distance from buildings, everything else, and the number goes way down even further yet. So I guess because I looked at, obviously, the township I live in, I looked at some surrounding townships near me, and countryside and ag, hunting is allowed in all those districts. We live in the Pennsylvania wilds in Lycoming County. The type of activity this is so much more regulated than me walking out there with my 3 14-year-old or 15-year-old kids. It's much, much safer from everything I've researched. From the standpoint of, these people are paying money to shoot something. So they don't want to miss. They're not going to, oh, I think I see something moving in the brush. They're going to have a guy standing there with them saying, look, you don't have a clear shot, hang on. That's the type of activity we're looking at here. I mean, I also looked at, like, in Cascade Township, who's in the county. There's a 1,000-yard shooting range there. You can shoot some of the highest powered rifles made at that facility. That's in Countryside.
So I just want to make sure we're all.
Sportsman's Club.
Yeah,
In
but
Plunkett's Creek Township.
we're on the same
is in
page that we
Countryside.
agree there's 155,000 acres.
I don't disagree with that.
Okay, and the parcel, the number of parcels, just so we're on the same page. So I guess my point is that we're not being too narrow in resource protection. You know, and we did a site.
In just resource protection, I wouldn't argue that, well, I'd say you only have 50% of that actual number available that's there. And when you add in Countryside and ag, have a lot of areas it's conducive. They also have a lot of areas it's not conducive. But I would argue that's what the zoning variance process is for. This is to say, okay,
Special
where does
exception.
this fit? Excuse me.
Special exception.
Special exception, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
These are areas where it may be an area that is conducive to it. That's how I looked at it.
So the way I understand what you're saying, by rattling off all these acres that are available, so what you're saying is they should sell the family farm and go buy one of these available acreages if they could find it.
No, what I'm saying is that I think if we're gonna make a serious change to the quality of life for people who for 30 years have had an expectation in a document that this government put out as to what they could reasonably expect, that before we make a serious change, we have to take into account what it means to the people in those communities. And the fact that someone has come before us, and I have all due respect for the person who wants to do it there, that is, in my mind, is not the driving factor. In other words, if I want to do a hunting preserve, I can buy land in resource protection, and I can do it. And I think that we shouldn't construct our zoning changes around whether or not someone has it in that particular place. I've used example. I have an office building on 4th Street that I can't rent. I'd like to put an adult bookstore there. Well, it's not allowed in the zone. Well, why shouldn't I be able to go to the agency that regulates it and say, listen, I want to use this building this way? Because what they would say to me is, you know what, if you want to put an adult bookstore and you go and you buy land in the area where it's pre-existing.
I don't think that's a good example, but.
Well, you know.
A better
if-
example
find a
might be
better
what
way.
just happened in Gamble with the venue.
That's.
2 years ago. We changed it for that. We changed Countryside for that.
When you move out into the woods, you
So that
expect
that was
people to be hunting
allowable.
around you.
And there was people that
And
were.
this is way different
No,
than,
but this is-
than the
this is-
first day of buck season, you know, or archery season and, you know, people throwing arrows and shooting guns. I mean, this is controlled, and I got no dog in this fight. I don't know if these folks are even the people that are applying. I have no idea. We didn't do introductions tonight, so I'm not even sure. But
Well, I don't think any of us has a dog in the fight. I don't have a dog in the fight, but what I am responding to is constituents. And we made site visits to both locations, okay? We made a site visit with the person who wants to do it, Mr. Fry, and we made a site visit with people who have experienced and lived next to an existing hunting preserve, okay? And what we found was that there are a lot of issues. No one is opposed to hunting. These people hunt who are opposed. But what we found is that there are a lot of issues that are occurring as byproducts of the existence of the hunting preserve. Give you an example. And we don't know for sure whether the feral pigs got loose out of that preserve or where, but there is a feral pig problem, and we heard from a farmer whose land has been, and we visited the site of another person who owns land, whose land has been damaged, but there's a real concern about it proliferating. We heard problems about carcass disposal. Now, that's regulated under the Ag Department. But the reality is that and the purpose of bringing up the problems is not to castigate, but to explain that there are a lot of things that happen as a consequence of having these hunting preserves. We've heard about,
If they're not run properly.
if they're not run properly. Well, the devil's in the details, because it's very difficult, but it really, to me, it begs the question, should they be there in the first place? Should they be in that particular area in the first place? Let's put it this way. If there are problems running it in the hunting from people's, who are living there, it has less consequence. I'm not saying it should be allowed to happen, but it has less consequence than being next door.
There's two outlying problems I see in this. In Lycoming County, in 1991, I think, when they did the zoning,
Yeah.
we broad brush stroke countryside zoning on everything. You know, if it really wasn't ag ground, if it really wasn't resource protection, we called it countryside because you could fit everything else that everybody wanted to do into it. So when we do that, we have way more acres of countryside zoning, and they may be ag or they may be resource protection if you have a very active zoning board and take the time to put the use where it needs to be. We're in the same vicinity of where we're talking about, there was an upland bird hunting facility down there, and we haven't had one complaint about that forever. And when we call no hunting preserves in the countryside zoning district, that takes all them out also. I think this needs to go in front of a zoning hearing board, who must visit the site, put the stipulations and the regulations in place that need to be followed, and then we have to hold the zoning officials accountable to make sure it's managed properly. If I had an auto body shop and I was dumping all my old paint out back of it, and have all my cans pile up out back and was stacking radiators out there, what's the difference between that, because that is a byproduct of their business, or carcasses and blood and guts and all that of an animal, because that is a byproduct of their business? It has to be, I don't like the word regulation because it's not where I'm at, but it has to be monitored and regulated. And if they're going to put these businesses on here that we're talking about, where they can have a clubhouse or whatever that may be, they have to be brought to the same standards if I was running a bar room on the exact opposite street corner. Case closed. It can be, it doesn't matter where we put it. It is all land inside of Lycoming County. It is how, it doesn't matter. What if you were in Gamble Township and the road went up through the middle, the other side was countryside zoning? It's still the same land. It has to be regulated per site basis. Anything other than that's a broad brush stroke, and we're just kidding ourselves. Because what you're talking about going and buying, maybe with the dairy farmers going out of business and the different farms tougher, this might be an alternate source. I could raise chuckers and pheasants in a small barn, release them into some sorghum and some soybean fields, and let some guys go and hunt them. We did, and I had this discussion before, when Dawn Trucking was going to go in down at where the Detroit dealership is, down across from Best Line, where you just put the new big housing development. All those neighbors came to the thing. We had a zoning hearing board here one night, and those people said, you know, we really don't have a problem with business because we know where we are. We're concerned about, are they going to be in there at 2 o'clock in the morning hooking trucks up and leaving? The stipulation put on Dawn Trucking was you're not allowed to move trucks from 7 in the morning, or you're only allowed to move trucks from 7 in the morning until 6 o'clock at night. They said, okay, we can do that. So if somebody comes in for a zoning hearing board meeting and they say, we would like to do this, and we say, okay, you can do it, but you're only allowed to do it Monday through Saturday, or, you know, from 6 a.m. till noon, or you put regulations, you take both parties, you put them in the room next to each other, you come out with a compromise. I don't care if it's in a countryside zoning, a resource protection, or an ag. Those boundaries don't mean anything to me. And I'm not here to endorse a hunting preserve or go against one, because I really don't care one way or another. It's not something I do, but I really don't care if somebody else does it. But I'm saying, just to take countryside out of it, when there are a lot of people in a countryside district because it was easy in 1991, that just makes it tough.
So in my mind, Brett, that's a problem that this county and this community has to deal with, what you described as the broad brush. But I'll submit to you that from what I understand from people who have talked about the history, they did it that way because they wanted to have a community that was of a certain character. They didn't want industrial in Muncie Township, so they opted for countryside.
I'm gonna argue that 75% of the rural county, or the rural townships, was a retired somebody, and this was the easiest way they could go. They didn't have zoning prior to that. Zoning was big government coming in and breathing down their neck. This was the easiest way to go, is we'll call it countryside. If you want to put a little subdivision house with a cul-de-sac in, you can do that. If you want to raise turkeys in the backyard, you can do that. And we can, it just sort of fit everybody. There was no true zoning planning commissions, anything like that, to come out and say, listen, if we do this, 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 and this is going to be the repercussions. Somebody went to them, you know, and that's, at that point in time, is where we got the most people coming into the county planning commission, because they didn't want any part of it.
So go ahead. I don't know.
The document that we have there, as far as the ordinance and the intent of what the zoning districts are for, raised a flag to me, okay? That is telling me whoever decided this back then had something in mind, whether it were the constituents that came in and said, listen, this is what I want to offer, okay, or not. It does clearly state the use, or the intended use, okay? So I can support Commissioner Maravito's argument on that with no problem, because it's in writing, okay? The second thing, and I'm just gonna ask you, if there were no county ordinance, okay, would every municipality have to have those zoning districts?
If every municipality had zoning, yes.
If there were no county
If there's no
zoning?
county zoning and a municipality chose to have zoning, they don't have to have zoning. If every municipality had their own zoning ordinance, every municipality has to, to the extent possible, allow for every use.
So by joining in this partnership and setting up those zoning districts within the partnership allows a broader area, right? Can I assume
You
that?
can spread the uses across a
Right.
larger area.
So, the townships, I'm assuming that our county zoning went to them and asked them, what zoning district do you want to be in? And I believe,
Paul Wensler
yeah.
told us.
Yeah, I
He
believe
was a
every
supervisor.
one of them, they wanted it all to fall within countryside. The entire
In Muncie
township.
Township.
Yeah, the town.
The
Muncie
Muncie
Township is not entirely countryside.
Okay,
No,
then
but
we have
Muncie,
misinformation.
Mr. Wensler told us that I think they wanted the majority of the area. Is the majority of the area, what, Muncie Township, what are the?
The
Well,
majority
mall's
of the
not
area in
countryside.
North-
No, the mall is not.
That's
That-
Muncie
and that-
Township.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
Blaze Alexander's not countryside.
yeah.
North or however you wanna go, of 180 is the country, more the countryside area.
Mostly.
Yeah.
Yeah, mostly, unless you're along 220.
To me, the
Actually-
characteristics of hunting, I looked at it and thought, what difference in countryside, what difference does it make if I'm hunting on my property that I'm allowed to do anywhere in countryside, as long as I'm staying within the game commission regulations of building setbacks and such? If I can do that, why can't my neighbor do it and have someone pay him?
I don't think the game commission regulates the hunting
That-
reserves though. That's what we.
They do
think
not.
about.
That's
They do
correct.
not, that's
They
right.
Department of
regulate,
Ag,
the game commission regulates the hunting grounds, which are the bird, which we have also included in here, because it's a use that we don't allow.
Can I clarify something that the Commissioner just brought up? The mall came in before this went into effect, isn't that correct?
Oh, yeah.
The mall, because this is what Paul Wensler represented to us. He said, look, I was a township supervisor back then, and basically, I think he was referring to the mall. He said the corporate lawyers came in and said, look, we want to put the mall in there. And they essentially said to them, you can do whatever the hell you want, but we have more lawyers than you, and we will litigate this until you people can't afford it. So as a township supervisor, he and others went towards county zoning as a way to protect the character of their community. And hence, the written description bears that out in terms of saying what they did and didn't want. So that's what I think happened there. That's why and that's what he told us was why they actually joined it. But I think the other point is that there's lots of places in Lycoming County you can still do a hunting preserve. Because you get out, more townships and boroughs are not in, they're 32 versus 21. So by law, they're gonna have to allow for every use.
Yeah, but we can't take that into consideration with our ordinance.
You can't take it into consideration with the ordinance. I, as an elected official, can realize that I'm not gonna deprive this county
No.
of the business.
We can't, when we're looking at the zoning ordinance,
Uh-huh.
we have to only look at where we are allowed to regulate. We can't, if, let's say Muncie Township is under our purview and the next door neighbor township is not,
Yeah.
we cannot look to see if that use is allowed there. We can only look at whether or not it's allowed in our municipalities.
Right. I'm not suggesting we look at it. What I'm saying is common sense tells me that there are 32 places in this county that are not under our county zone.
and common sense tells me, we had a meeting and invited all the member townships of this county. And I believe myself, and 2 other townships were represented, was it. There was nobody else there. Nobody came. It was publicly advertised, it was the time to talk about it and discuss it, and nobody showed up.
Can I tell you a story? I know a commissioner that went to raise taxes, held public meetings all throughout the county. I think 1 person or 2 people came to object to the raising of taxes. It doesn't surprise me that sometimes the public doesn't come out. I mean, it's not, I'm not.
Well, these were the
defending it.
supervisors for the townships that are within,
Yeah.
so they're
No, I
not
hear you.
just John Q. Public.
I
They're
hear
folks
you.
that are representing the townships
Yeah.
that have a stake in this.
And Joe, that's, and that's a tough decision, okay? Because they vote, constituents of that area vote for their township supervisors. And why aren't they saying something to them? Okay? And that was a big argument of mine. I'm very concerned about, overstepping my boundaries of a municipality. I've got to say this. We went out to Stacy's place. Very nice. I looked at it from that vantage point, and I thought if there were shooting lanes or whatever within that area, I could feel comfortable with that. Okay, there are maybe 3 areas that I would be concerned about. That a stray bullet could be right in the direct line of fire in another house. Okay, I shoot weapons, 1,000 yards. I've been in one of those contests, and that bullet might drop 4, 6 inches, but whatever it is over that distance. But a stray bullet is a concern. So I did go out to those properties last week, and I saw probably 3 areas that I'm concerned about stray bullets. So the question was, who sits on the zoning board that allows the special exceptions? Are they members of their community, or are they?
Yes, they have to be.
They're members of their community, period, even though they fall within the purview of the county ordinances. Okay, I'm good with that. They're the ones that can really focus, down onto the restrictions within that preserve.
Any
right?
and all safety, any and all safety restrictions will be coming out of them that's above and beyond what these are, and based upon a site-specific issue.
Because one of the things we talked about, Tony, early in this, and I agree with you 100%, but one of the things we said is, we keep saying where are bullets going. At no point have we said, this site-specific is not conducive to any bullets. If you are interested in opening this up as a zoning hearing board, if you are interested in opening this up as an archery only, that is a condition of use. That takes care of the neighbors complaining about the shooting. That takes care of all the above. That's the only problem I have. If it wouldn't be for that, I could let this thing come and go with no problem. But there is so many different ways that this is done that a zoning hearing board could lay the regulations out. Because I agree, most of these, unless you had 300 acres, I wouldn't be too interested in firearms. Just, we have 150 acres and we have 3 people hunt there the first day of hunting season. It's mostly fields, that's all we can house. But if it's an archery only, if it is an upland bird preserve, those are all different things that we have to take into consideration.
The other thing that at least I noticed, was while we were out on one of those properties, they were all very, very nice. The one had a really nice residence, okay, a really nice house. And as we were on the road, we detected, okay, not constant, but while we were standing there, within the first 10 minutes, twice we smelled something dead. Okay, you can't miss that smell. It's a horrific smell, and it was stated, well, that's probably where they throw the guts. Okay, so an owner's responsibility and accountability for doing certain things right has to be part of that equation of allowing them. So, you know, if that's where they're dumping the guts and then eventually burying them, yeah, I'm not okay with that.
So that was somewhere where there's already preserving taken?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
So was that Stacy Fry's property?
Yeah, I think so.
Well,
It's the Pine
not the
Ridge
one,
Yields-
not the one where
It hasn't even been applied for.
the preserve
the
is,
Pine
or proposed preserve.
pipeline.
What Smiley's talking about is a deer, because I worked there, that someone shot from Ernie Whelan's driveway, and I just actually pulled it out down to the road to get rid of it. That's one problem we do have, is like Ernie Whelan's driveway seems to be a constant problem. We find dead animals that people shoot from his driveway. And the smile you're talking about, I can take you and show you the exact deer. That's how I found it, because I don't go in the woods in this time of year. But I smiled it, I walked out there, and it's a deer, and it's got a bullet hole right behind his front shoulder, and you can follow the blood trail from the perimeter road to right where it died, and the only place that deer could have been shot was Ernie Whelan's driveway. That's happened a dozen times. So maybe that deer got shot on purpose. I'm not saying it did. But maybe that deer got shot on purpose. And another thing I heard here today that kind of upset me is that what you said, sir, on the left, you used the word feral hogs. We don't sell feral hogs. We sell pure European boars that are all fixed. They're numbered, they're vetted and tested, and they're brought in. So any pig problem they have did not come from us. I also think from the grapevine we listen to, that this happened at a unique time, that someone put those out there to make us look bad, but they're not even the same pigs. We shoot 100% European boars, fixed, neutered, so they cannot breed. And the pigs that are doing the damage are not European boars.
Sir, could you state your name so we have?
I'm Rod Fry, I work at Pipeline Bridge, no relation, just, it's a retirement job, I retired from the government. I work for Stacy, so I agree with the smile, sir, but I found it myself. And it's in a convenient location, so that it'll go that way.
That's where I was going with it, Tony. I was wondering, if, you
So,
know, you smell
Tony
something, are
saw
you
it.
investigating
Oh,
where it's
well,
coming
this
from?
is- we just
What they
went.
said to us is that periodically there is, this is what Mr. Whelan said to us, that periodically there's a buildup of guts. They call Stacy sends someone over, and they throw dirt on it.
Not
So-
true, it's buried every day.
Okay, it's buried every day, so there is apparently an area where they
I mean,
bury
it takes a
guts.
while for guts to start stinking when
Was
I
the
shot a
line
live
be
deer.
buried
Well,
up by
and,
requirement
you know,
every
it was a
time?
pretty hot day when we were out there.
I probably last year, I just did some quick numbers here, so don't quote me to the exact number. I composted about 17,000 chickens last year, maybe 20,000. Through the Department of Ag, they even want me to have a daily log of what my temperature of my compost pile is. I can take you down right now and put you next to my compost pile, and you wouldn't know what it was. You would just think it was a pile of manure there. Once again, if it is being properly regulated and it is being properly managed to the standards that a farmer is being regulated.
So there's where I'm leading, okay, because you are regulated,
That's
Okay.
the same regulation that these would be under.
this, the exact same.
Yes.
Yes.
So then, when you say you're burying guts.
With lime, we're regulated, we're
Okay,
told
so
how we have to do it, how deep the hole
That
has
is
to be.
something normal. And I think we just went to the preserve, not to the preserve, but to the other homes on Friday, wasn't it? Thursday or Friday. So I knew we were having a meeting. I'll call you later. But it's a concern. The boars, the escaped boars, we're concerned. And we're hearing it from a farmer that allows people to hunt them on his land just to make sure that.
Well, you know, every one of our pigs is numbered. He has to keep impeccable records from every number, every aspect. We have to buy them from people that raise them just for the hunting preserve. They're not feral pigs. They're not something you go out in the wild and catch and put in a hunting preserve. They're regulated. And he has records from every year we've been there, and every pig has its individual number.
Well, somehow there are piglets that are also being killed, and so either.
So we can't have pigs.
Well, I didn't say that they, well, either that or they weren't, someone wasn't fixed, or it's a pig coming from a different place. I don't know. None of us has seen, no one in this room, I think, has seen a pig come from your property. So I'm not accusing you, but what
I could've brought
and that was the
thousands of
point.
pigs.
The point of the site visit was to understand what are the ancillary problems that come when you have hunting preserves. And
Because
so
I think we gotta be careful not to blind our vision
Mhm.
of a county-wide ordinance by one location.
And the only thing I can say is that it's not an area that's not without a huge amount of parcels and acreage. It's 150,000 acres, and it's over, how many parcels is it, Shannon? 8,000 or 2,000?
Commissioner?
It's 2,800 parcels, but you really can't look at the number of parcels because every parcel size is different.
I get that.
It's
But-
the acreage more is.
Right, the acreage.
I tried to look at it, back in the vetting process of this whole thing, before we made our decision. All three districts combined is 485,000 acres. 70% of that is resource protection, of which 56% can't be used. 17% is or countryside, and 12%'s ag. That's the numbers. And there are a lot of places in countryside and ag where these would work. There's also a lot of places where they won't, without some very heavy, special exceptions put in place with that.
This would be doing nothing different than what's done already.
Well, and
Every hunting season, only it's under, like you said, a controlled environment.
we can
with less
control how many they
people.
kill.
It's the best controlled environment you have for hunting.
We can control, if you wanna put this in, you have 50 acres, you're allowed 32 harvests a year, you know, and you regulate that back and forth. You negotiate that when it comes to the table of the zoning hearing board. That, we are not using the zoning hearing board. If what he's saying is a concern of where are we going to compost it, if I go to put in a new one with my stormwater management, I gotta have a composter shed. You need a concreted composter shed with a roof on it, and there must be a foot of, we have to use manure, a foot of manure maintained over top any dead animal or any carcass at that point. It's what we make the hog barns do, or you make them put in, if you're going to go down this route, you make them put an incinerator in. You have to have an electric incinerator that has so many turns per day, or a gas-fired incinerator. These are all things, and I'm not saying I like it because it regulates you too hard, but if it is a concern and somebody feels that strongly about putting it into district, then a $12,000 incinerator is not a real big ordeal, or archery hunting only is not a real big ordeal. I'm just afraid if we strike it out across the county wide, it's just too broad.
See, I don't like to put the numbers on things. I'd rather sit and say, okay, that, you know, if you're gonna put those fixed European hogs in there, you can't have the feral hogs. You know, I mean, that's simple. And then if a feral hog comes out of your place, then you're shut down. I mean, I think that's more than fair, isn't it?
Absolutely, you're
You
not
know?
supposed to.
And all of that
So if
is,
somebody is putting feral hogs out, then they're, you know, they need to be held accountable somewhere, or that maybe it needs to be illegal to have feral hogs, you know, the way they reproduce. I mean, my God, they're shooting with 50 cows in Texas out of a helicopter, you know? So, it's a problem. I know it's a big problem, but, I mean, if these guys are doing all the things the right way, and you just have some neighbors that are trying to cause issues and problems, I don't think that these guys, you know, should suffer from that. You know, and I don't think these guys should have to sell the farm to find another farm in a different area. I don't agree with that either, you know? So that's my 2 cents. And as far as those shooting lanes go, I'm sure these guys aren't gonna put a couple 12-year-old or 18-year-old kids or 60-year-old guys, whatever it is, in the line of houses. You know, these guys are businessmen, you know? I mean, they're not gonna put people in danger. You know, I mean, again, it's more dangerous. All these areas, towns, Loyalsock, Montoursville, Southwest, where these guys are shooting high-powered rifles for weeks amongst all different times of the year, and you don't think they're not pointed at houses?
We do have a couple of other
Pointed all over the place.
Sorry. We do have a couple members of the public if you wanted to see, and I don't know how many people we may have on the phone or not. If you wanted to.
I just wanted to say one more thing, and then I'll be done to all three. To all three.
Keller logged in. don't think there's anybody else in the general public.
I thought my job as a planning commission member was to look at areas where this was either conducive or not conducive. Doesn't have anything to do with this gentleman back here. Quite frankly, someone said, Brad, I think, or someone, the timing was strange, but I'm not looking at one parcel when I made my thought process in where this will be good. I looked at all the townships, the 21 townships within the county, and looked at all the countryside, all the ag, and the resource protection, and tried to say where it makes sense and where it doesn't. And there's a lot of ground, private property, that where it makes sense that if somebody wants to do it, they should have the right to do that. That's how I look at it. With the special exception. I was actually I wanted it to be in resource protection with, just without special exception in countryside and ag only. But once we discussed everything, I was good with having it in all three, just to be on the safe side.
I don't think that could be better said. There was a lot of debate about this, a lot of open debate, a lot of due diligence on the planning commission's end. We were appointed to this board, and we looked at it. We have a lot of passionate members who want to do the right job, and we did. I'm emphatic about that. We did the right job. What we recommended to the planning department and their due diligence, I gotta be honest with you, in 8 years on this board, we hit the nail on the head on this one. Absolute, right dead center.
So what was the argument that turned you over? Because you said you thought it was the best use for resource protection, the hunting preserve. You felt that.
No, I said it because I said you would be allowed to do it without any special exception hearing.
Right.
And your question to me is what?
Well,
Why did I feel that?
That's what you said originally, that you felt that that's where it should be at.
No.
Then after discussion, you thought, okay.
No. I felt that resource protection should be the only place it should be allowed without special exception.
Right.
Without special
exception.
exception.
I got you.
The other two, I agreed it should be allowed in,
Okay.
but with exception. Yeah, I never.
Okay, that's good.
And when we had discussed that, that's about when I came on board, and when we were discussing those issues, because of the safety issues, and because there would be parcels where you would also have to think about, okay, shooting areas and shooting lanes or shooting directions more. That's when we decided that we broached to the planning commission, we think the special exception is the best way to go, because then the zoning hearing board has the ability to add the safety precautions needed in order to determine, okay, hey, we have these surrounding buildings or these surrounding uses, which in every special exception hearing, every property within 300 feet of the use gets posted, so that there is absolutely no way that somebody can say we didn't know it was going to happen. So every property within a 300-foot distance of that property that the use is being proposed on is posted, so that they would have the potential to come in to the zoning hearing board, voice their concerns, and or say, well, that information isn't correct, here's,
And they get a
So,
letter in the mail,
but with
correct?
all due respect to that, to me, that begs the question of should it be in that zone to begin with? And,
No,
you know,
that's
if this
required by law.
document, no,
That's
I
required
understand it's
by law.
required by law, I know that. But what I'm trying to say to you is if this document didn't exist, that said 20, 30 years ago, we anticipate hunting preserves and resource protection, or if this document said we anticipate hunting preserves in agriculture and in countryside, but this document says the exact opposite. It says not only do we only anticipate it there, but it says ag should be preserved for agriculture. It says that the highest and best use of the land is agriculture. It says in countryside that it's to permit residential development.
Wait a minute.
Wait,
You're
let me
taking
just
isolated
finish.
situations. Let me give you a good example. You bought a farm over in Armstrong Township, 260 acres. You made it into nothing more than a park, a walking wildlife park. You took that off the ag roll of production of agricultural land and some of the best ground in our county. Not just average ground, the best. And you took that off it, and the county was involved with purchasing that property, and you've changed the use completely changed the use, there's no farming ever again in our lifetimes will be on that farm, well, there you are.
And that community is part of the county zoning.
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
No,
But
it's
it
not.
doesn't make a difference.
No,
What I'm
no.
trying to say is,
No, listen, it makes a big difference, because that particular parcel of land was not controlled by this planning commission or this board of commissioners. They're controlled by a different,
then why did we take county funds to gather the grants and do all the work for it? Let me ask you that.
that's a whole nother
Oh,
question.
come on.
No, but
I'm
Carl,
done. I don't want to hear
that
that.
should
You're
not
swaying
impact-
everything around here, and, you're just twisting things around, that's
No,
all.
that should not impact the decision this board makes,
Well, okay.
because it has nothing to do with this issue. It doesn't have anything to do with even the zoning issue. But my point is that you have to balance people's rights. You know the old saying, my rights end where your nose begins? And I feel like we have to balance the right of people who have property to do what they want with it, with the rights of people who have lived there for 30, 40, 50 years. People who are 75 years old, who said, all of a sudden now you're putting something in. I guess this is what I would ask each of you gentlemen to do. Think of the worst thing that you would want next door to you. Whatever it may be.
Well, I live in countryside, and I know hunting is allowed all around me.
What would you
So
not
it wouldn't
want
make any
there?
difference if it was a hunting
What
preserve
would,
or.
what would you not want there?
How's it change anything from what's there now? The
Because,
smell?
no,
What's
look.
what changes for them? A
A
fence?
lot of things change.
What?
That-
What?
Well,
What
we
changes?
got from the site visit
Really?
that there are a lot of
changes?
problems.
What
you know?
problem?
But, well, there
Sounds
was
like you have a
waste that we
staged
smelled, we
smell.
smelled
You
dead
That
heard-
animals.
sounds
You heard one
staged.
side.
That's staged.
Okay,
No, no.
Commissioner, I haven't said a word yet,
I don't see what the issue is.
and here's my take on this. I saw how hard the planning commission, before I was commissioner, I sat in on one of the meetings that had to deal with this. They vetted this just that night alone, they vetted it for over an hour and a half. It was an 8-to-1 vote to go the way they went. There was one person opposed to Countryside, he was no longer on the planning commission. And they vetted it, they put a lot of energy, they asked a lot of tough questions that night. And as a elected commissioner, I was impressed. I wasn't actually an acting commissioner yet, but I was really impressed with the work they put in that night. Shannon was here, she answered a lot of their questions. Tom worked on it, and then the planning commission gets involved. And they research it, and they do their due diligence. And they did hour after hour after hour of work on this. The township supervisors who advertised this, they did their due diligence. Didn't have anybody opposed to it. Nobody complained about it at that time. They did it. So we have 3 different entities here that did their job. And they did it with not a dog in the fight, and they did exactly what they were supposed to do, and they come to us with their recommendations. Now, as a board, we're into our 5th, going into our 6th month of this, and we're gonna vote on this Thursday, one way or another. And like I said the other night, or the other meeting, when I voted no, I voted because there was 3 entities who vetted it, said it was fine the way it was. It comes down to zoning. Zoning can regulate this the way they're supposed to. And the only concern I had tonight, which was answered to me, was the hogs, the feral hogs. You guys don't have them, okay? There's hogs down there, I don't know who put them out there, but that's an issue. It can destroy a farm quicker than anything, faster
He's
than
got the
deer.
biggest one in the area.
Right.
They for a farm,
Right, and that's a concern, and they're not your hogs. They're not gonna put shooting lanes in danger of these 3 houses. Zoning they'll make sure all the safety precautions are in place. They can say how many, what do they call them, hunts per year? What do you guys actually call them? Hunts per year. They can say what hours they are. It's just like Brett says, the regulations on the chicken farms. They'll put the regulations in place. That's their job. It's our job to make sure that there is something there, because there hasn't been anything there in the past. And that's why there's 5 other ones around. So we have a responsibility to say, okay, we put the blessing on it, such as the other three entities have. Now zoning, do your job and make sure they follow the guidelines and it's regulated. And I like the fact that there's gonna be a house for the harvest to make sure the carcasses are disposed of. So that's another issue that's taken care of.
That's all through the Department of Ag, that's nothing we can regulate.
Right, but still it's done. Okay? I think it should be added in there about the 2 foot underground with the electric fence. I think that should be, it should be and or. That should be in there.
That should be underground electric fence or and or equivalent to.
Right,
Give them another option.
yeah.
Because that's the problem, is those fences all rotted off
Yeah,
30
wood
years
rots
ago,
off. Yeah,
and that's why your
right.
hogs are out there running around.
Yep, exactly, that's a great idea.
Because they just dug underneath them where they rotted.
Yep,
Yeah, but now, with all due respect, we went out there, this is what was said. Listen, I'm not a judge. Okay, I'm not judging who's right, who's wrong, who's telling the truth, who's not. Okay, we were told that 14 pigs were killed. None of them were yours. Were they?
Ours are all vetted, tested, numbered with a tag.
Just
Okay,
like stray
and that's
Where
good,
they come
so,
from.
but here again, it's not my responsibility to decide, I'm not here to regulate you, you know?
I get
I've
it.
been called by no less than 70-some people that own property, and probably 6 that were there, 4 that surrounded or bordered you, right, that are concerned. I get it, and I understand, but when you have that many constituents, you know, sign a petition and then email you, as an elected official, we have to do some more due diligence, okay? And I think that we did, you know, I don't know who appoints your zoning board, your zoning hearing boards
You guys do.
of a municipality?
Whoever, the governing body appoints the zoning hearing board members. So in our case, it would be for the partnership, and for a different municipality, it would be that municipality for that.
So we do appoint, okay.
But they are, you know, they're quasi judicial.
Yes.
They have their own solicitor, they have their own, everything is separate from the governing body, so there's no issues.
And we've proven in past, if you drop out of the county's coalition, you lose your zoning hearing board member that day. So it's not even like you have somebody that's carrying on past you.
Yeah. And Commissioner, in response to, how would you like it to be in your neighborhood? I had it in my neighborhood. I had a house that my dad built back in 1950, and it stayed in our family till 2000 when my mom passed. We sold it at that time. And it was a residential neighborhood, an outstanding residential neighborhood. And there was an empty lot behind it. And guess what they did? They put a nursing home behind it, right on top of us. And we had all kinds of citizens opposed to it, had a fit. Well, that nursing home's still there, and they're a good neighbor. And it didn't drive down the property value at all. We sold that house for a good price. And it's still a nice house, and the nursing home's still sitting there. So yeah, these things come in, and you don't want them at first, but guess what? They end up being not a bad neighbor after all. So those things happen.
Should we listen to public
Yeah.
comment now? If you would like to comment, if you could go up to the podium and state your name and where you're from, and you have 3 minutes to discuss any of your issues. And then we'll go to if there's any online comments.
My name is Karen Day. I've lived on 220 in Pennsdale for 28 years. I have a letter here from Bill Keller, but I also have a couple things I'd like to say, so I don't know if I get 2 sets of 3 minutes or
Take
how that
your
works.
time, don't worry about the time.
Okay. So the letter from
Thank
Bill
you for being
Keller,
here.
he could not be here
Yeah,
because
thank you
his
for
wife
being
can't take the chance of being sick.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Bill Keller, and I live below one of the proposed sites for the preserve. I understand the reason for this meeting is that the Planning Commission is having an issue with the commissioners not siding with the Planning Commission recommendation. I read that the Planning Commission said they spent a lot of time and vetted this. So may I ask how many of the residences on the petition have you contacted and have they addressed their concerns? I have talked to quite a few and none of them said the planning commission had contacted them. We, the residents, cannot understand why you are supporting this with so much enthusiasm. I have heard that it has been said only a couple of people on the petition are affected. Everyone on that petition lives or owns land and uses it for recreational purposes such as horseback riding, hunting, and etc., and are in the range of a stray bullet. Several of the others live back by the existing preserve. What you should do is talk to Mr. Wheeland, who lives right beside it. Ask him his experience with the smell, and at times he cannot be outside, or when they start shooting, he goes inside because he's afraid of being shot, or the turkey buzzards that are there due to all the guts laying around and the birds nesting on his beautiful home, relieving themselves. Now a new issue with hogs digging up his property. This is to name a few. Why would you not talk to someone like him before you could make a decision? Or go on the other side of the preserve and talk to the farmer, Kurt Lockley, ask him about the erosion issues and how this has affected his regular hunting, since the fenced-in area has changed the migration of the deer. Ask him about the issues he is having with the hogs. I have heard that the township approved. The township seemed to have taken sides on this. I thought that an elected official was to represent the people that put you in office, especially when there are many and not just one. The supervisor stated that the supervisors and planning commission visited the proposed site, and he named the people that were there on the planning board. Just within a few days, one of the planning guys told me they were up there. I asked what he thought. He said, well, over toward my way there is a rise, and he didn't think bullets would come my way. I started to tell him my concerns. His statement to me was, I don't think I can vote against it because he's my relation. Years ago, we went with county zoning to prevent nepotism and cronyism, the good old boys club. Now I hear that this is to be only for whitetail and used only 4 months out of a year, bow and arrow. I feel this is just to pacify us, to get this passed, and then whatever. So God forbid if this should pass, it should be put in writing that this is all it ever could be. In closing, you pass this very thing could happen near you if you live in the countryside in Lycoming County. I would like you all to put yourselves in our place. This is our home, our quality of life, and our safety we are fighting for. Thank you for allowing me to vent. That was from Bill Keller.
Can I respond to that?
Please.
In all due respect, the biggest problem I have here tonight, and I feel bad for him, I'm not arguing that. The biggest problem I have here tonight is we got 2 different meetings going on here. We're acting like everything we're talking about is against the Fry establishment, when as myself and as a planning commission, it is all of Lycoming County. We are, this document covers every countryside zoning district in Lycoming County.
Yep.
For, I agree probably with him. I have not been to the site, I can't go down that road. I cannot sit here and tell somebody in Brown Township that they can't do this, but they're in countryside zoning because of what he has. Do you see where I want you to relay that from the deepest part of my heart is if we say we do not agree with this in countryside zoning district under the Lycoming County Cooperation Partnership, then that is every countryside zoning district in all of Lycoming County.
We also have no application, and
Yeah.
which is why we can't look at this
That's
as.
because you can't, nobody can give me one, I've
No,
asked
no,
Tom 35 times for
Excuse
one.
me.
We can't.
Wait till she's talking, then you're gonna have to come up later and talk.
Yeah.
Can't interrupt the meeting, please. Thank you.
The reason that we moved forward with putting together information for this type of use is because we did not allow it. So therefore, when we started the research and started moving forward with this, there is no application. There was a person who was interested in putting this use in on his property. And when we realized that we needed to make an amendment to the zoning ordinance, we cannot look at a site-specific property because we do not have an application. We have to look at the entire area that we're considering it to be allowed. And it is the zoning hearing board that will look at site-specific applications. So what we did was we did our due diligence. We looked at what the Department of Ag regulates. We looked at the Game Commission. We looked at everything that is regulated by an outside entity that we cannot overstep. And then we also looked at the different uses that were already grandfathered in because of coming before the zoning ordinance. And then we did take into consideration the concerns from Bill Keller and those people that signed that petition at the November meeting, which is why we changed the way that the distance is listed. We also added the requirement of a site plan, and with the 1,000-foot for all building structures and anything that houses livestock within 1,000 feet and all other primary structures. Those were added in relation to the comments that we received from Bill Keller and those applicants. We have to take everybody into consideration. Whether or not the commissioners vote for this in all 3 areas or just the 1 area, the planning commission is the professional body and the planning staff are the professional body. We take it into consideration, we make our recommendations. We do not make our recommendations based on a single site. We're not allowed to do that. So we have to look and see, okay, how do we put it together based upon the knowledge that we have without looking at a specific site? And then we make that recommendation to the planning commission vets it and makes that recommendation to the commissioners. And it's up to, the governing body is the one that adopts it. And that's part of the due diligence.
Now, can you let this woman speak, because she's been standing there? Please tell us, you've been there for 28 years.
I have been there for 28 years, and this part is for me. I've lived on 220 for 28 years. It's a great area. Personally, I think that 1 preserve in that area is enough. I'm an NRA member. I have been a lifetime member for a very long time. I was a firearms instructor for the NRA, so I am not anti-gun by any means. If this one is approved, and now there's 2, I just met Stacy tonight. I did not know who he was, so it's nothing personal. I have nothing personal against the man. But if he does this, now tonight, in this meeting, out loud, he said, I have one of the largest farms there is around. So what's to stop him from doing this again and again, for as many times as he can do it in 100 acres? Why isn't 1 enough in this area?
We're not allowed to do that by the state law.
Just to put.
Well, just so, look, I'm not allowed to do it by state law, but what the woman is telling us is you don't need to do it in countryside. And while the planning department may have recommended it, I'll be honest with you, I wasn't going to say this tonight, but I'm disappointed that the planning department did not see in this document that it wasn't supposed to be recommended, that it wasn't recommended in anything other than resource protection.
One of the other things, Rick.
Now, you weren't here, Shannon, in all due respect to you, it was before you.
It does talk about in countryside preserving natural habitat and scenic values, and that is part of and also commercial recreation.
I get that, but
So-
this woman is raising a very important point. And what she's saying is that if you make it in a very broad stroke and you allow it in 3 zones, not only do you increase the possibility of them being in more and more places, and by the way, whether you can regulate and not have feral pigs versus the other pigs. The point of bringing up what happened on the site visit was not to castigate, and I said this at the beginning of the meeting, not to castigate Mr. Fry, but to explain the consequences that come from these things. And that's why I think that a more narrow change, rather than uprooting people's lives who have lived in this community for 28, 30 years.
What we implemented was a recommendation, and the zoning hearing board will then hear before this use is ever enacted in these 3 zone districts. And you've heard all of this, but you just don't want it in the countryside. No matter what we tell you, you're gonna say no.
Carl, it begs the question to me of what can people rely on when they invest in our community? If somebody has invested for 30 years, or 40 years, or 50 years, what can they rely on to be able to say?
They go to the zoning hearing board, and they have they can go there, and they can talk all about that. They can say, I've invested. We've all invested. If you own real estate, you've all invested. You know, I'm right here, I'm the real estate appraiser. So when we talk about this stuff, there's things that happen that sometimes, I heard someone say, that doesn't really Commissioner Metzger said,
38 years, they changed it from an R1 to an R2 overnight. 38 years, and now there's a nursing home there. Things change,
Miss.
and they're a good neighbor.
Yeah, back to Rick's
Yeah,
point.
let's
Are
let you
done?
finish your.
Or would you-
I'm not finished.
Yeah, let's let you
Okay.
finish your.
I know our township supervisor I had heard this, I was not there, said that we support this, you know, that it's, but he does not speak for the people, which I think you can tell by the petition that was signed, that there's more people in Pennsdale that are against this than are anywhere near for it. Stacy also spoke to me tonight and told me that 99% of this, 99% is gonna be bow and arrow only. 99%. So that means 1% of the time in a specified 2-week period is gonna be high power rifle. Now, if this does get passed and it goes to the zoning board, then that needs to be stated.
mm-hmm,
And I agree with you 100%, that there are things that need to be taken care of at the zoning board, but will it be?
Well,
How do I get to go to this?
yes,
Absolutely.
and here's what I want to, on the planning commission, I was on the zoning hearing board. I used to sit right over there where she sits, and they would fill this room clear full of people. And Lloyd Forsey will sit at the head of the table and said, is there anybody here that would like to present anything? And everybody sits there and they go like this and they scowl their faces and you can just see the blood beat red in their face. And nobody has the guts to get up and stand behind a podium like you are tonight. Because your first, if I'm wrong, run me through this. The first appeal process just goes to a judge and all he does is listens to the recorded tapes of that night. So as you go to these hearings, get up and speak your piece, because then they can put it as a condition of use. And if he says 99%, then if he shoots 100 deer that year, there better been one shot with a rifle. And that is where, you Mr. Fry?
Yep.
Mr. Fry is there and you guys are there, and I don't want to call it a bargaining appointment,
Right.
but it is where both sides get the chance to hash it out. But if you go there and you don't say a word, and he goes there and he doesn't say a word, and you get what the zoning hearing board hands down,
I mean, that's my fault.
then it's on your shoulders.
That's right.
And that's the biggest problem I had as a zoning hearing board member, because I could see the people sitting in the audience, and I could see their faces are beet red, and they would not stand up and say a word. And there's nothing that I can do as a zoning hearing board member, because that tape that goes to that judge can't hear people's heads shaking and faces being beet red. So, and that's why I wanted to say, when I put the burden of this on the zoning hearing board, because you get your voice heard.
So how do I find out when these hearings are?
It's
First-
posted.
First, we need to decide, the commissioners will have to decide what the actual amendment will be.
Okay.
And then you will know whether or not this will be an issue or not for your property.
And then it is posted on the property, it is in the Sun Gazette 2 times prior to the meeting.
Well, if you're within 300 feet of an application of any kind of special exception hearing process, your property will be posted, and Tom, you also get a
We
registered,
send notifications.
we send a letter in the mail.
So all the neighbors that touch it will get a.
I don't touch it.
Yeah, but usually
So I
that
know
creates,
somebody
yeah,
does.
usually that
Yeah.
creates, when the letters hit the
Yeah.
mailbox is when the stir
Okay.
starts.
No
Okay.
one touches it.
So I'm gonna get 3 of them.
They could, yeah,
Well,
I've seen
thank you for
worse.
your time.
Ma'am,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'd like to
Thank you for
respond to
coming.
just Mr. Keller, some of his concerns.
I believe he's listening.
Wait, is this,
Okay.
if he's on the line, we can let him talk. I mean, but first we want to
He
get,
did,
give her.
she read it.
Okay.
He had made a comment regarding, I just want to make clear that I personally, as a commission member, did not come to any of my decisions. They vote, we give recommendations, it's their vote. I believe you read in his letter that he felt we were upset, that the commission was upset because they weren't siding with us or something to that effect. I by no means feel that way whatsoever. Their decision is their decision. I gave my recommendation, I voted, I'm fine with whatever they come up with. That's part of the job of being below them. The second thing is, I just did what I thought was correct in order to balance land use rights and keeping the characteristics of the intended zone proper. I intentionally, I don't know if Tom or someone that was at the ad hoc meeting, they started to describe this situation, and I said, time out. I don't want to know what district that's in. I asked them to stop. To the point of, I think it was November, till I learned what district this thing, I didn't care. I don't want to know, because I didn't want to cloud my judgment in whether someone was intending to put an application in or not. It had nothing to do with my thought process. So I just felt it important, Mr. Keller.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have anybody else in the room who would like to speak?
I'm Rod Fry, no relation, but anyways, I work for Stacy at the hunting preserve. I heard the concerns from the gentleman on the left. I think I voiced what it was, and you know what I mean, and I'm there every day. And at the end of the day, we're not doing anything different than what happens every year. It's hunting. It's gonna be highly regulated, it's gonna be less people. 9 days out of 10 in the state of Pennsylvania, people don't even know who's on their ground. I go to the tree stand on his property at an hour before daylight to hunt the 1 day out of the year I get to hunt, and there's already a guy in it, we don't even know him. So this is much highly regulated, a lot safer. I think we discussed the pig problem. I'll guarantee you they didn't come from us, because we have numbers on every pig. And I told you what the stink problem was, sir, on the right. I smelled it, I went, and that's what it was. And we have that problem quite often. The stuff gets shot from that driveway, and it runs in our woods, and one time it was a $15,000 loss. It was a buck like this. But we didn't run and bawl and call the cops, and we just dissected it and went on with it. But at the end of the day, nothing different is happening than happens every day, except there's gonna be a fence. He still owns the property. It's gonna be regulated, and we talked about it. Only hunting season. Archery season 6-7 weeks long anyways. And rifle season, we only have a tiny, minuscule amount of rifle hunters. That seems to be a dying sport in this business. I mean, everybody wants to shoot with a bow or their new crossbow. And the people hunt closer to all these surrounding properties in the regular hunting season than we will ever be. I mean, there's people on every bank. Are you a hunter?
I've hunted, I'm not an actual active hunter, but I've hunted.
If anybody that hunts knows what I'm talking about, the Orange Army. That's not gonna be here anymore. It's gonna be a lot safer for us and everybody around it. I mean, anybody that owns private property in Pennsylvania knows how the trespassing goes. Well, I didn't know it was your land, but that's not gonna happen anymore. So really, nothing is changing except a fence went up. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. To put this in perspective, this isn't about the Fry farm.
Correct.
Okay? This came to us because we have to, as a county, be responsible to put an ordinance in place that looks at the entire county.
Yeah.
And whether that's what they recommended or what Commissioner Marabito amended to actually put as an amendment to the original ordinance last week, that's to be decided by the District Board of Commissioners. Okay, it's, again, it goes back to the entire county, man. Okay, and then it comes into, once that's enacted, then it's up to every different municipality with their zoning to do what they feel necessary to make sure.
Oh,
it's
yeah, I
regulated.
understand. I just, at the end of the day, it's nothing different than every other year, those since the beginning of
So,
time.
I want people to, and I think most people in this room understand that this, like Fred says, it's almost like two hearings melding into one. And it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. We're here to make sure that this ordinance gets done properly. It affects every spot in this county, whether it includes all three of those resource and countryside or the agricultural, to make sure they're all included or one's excluded, whatever that may be. And then it applies to your property.
Yeah, I mean,
According to
we
what-
sit there and we hear all the concerns.
And that's the reason why I voted the way I did, because I'm looking at the entire county, and then I look at it, after me, it's up to zoning.
Yeah.
It's up to zoning to make sure that everything's in place regarding safety and precautions, and that's their job. And it's up to those residents who live there to come out and tell zoning what they want, what they don't want. And that's where it gets fine tuned. That's where, we give them the draft, they do the fine tune, final draft.
we're allowed to go to that,
Right,
you know.
and that's where the final plan comes into place, man.
We have someone else, another member of the public online here. If this gentleman's done, there's someone else.
I don't know if there's anybody else here that wants to, or do you wanna go online?
I don't know.
I'm all right, Scott, we're all on board, I told you all before that, it's gotta get approved by the three of you first, and then, I'm willing to listen to any, I know I'm separate, but you gotta get something passed.
Right.
I know, you know what I mean? I've been sitting around here for a year plus,
Yeah, well, this was voted on
trying to
Thursday.
figure out what I'm allowed to do and what I'm not allowed to do. You know what I
We have a
mean?
work session tomorrow, and this is the only thing we're going to go into Thursday to actually vote on.
That's fine, thank you.
Is there anybody else here from the public that wants to speak?
I think, Tom, do we have somebody online that would like to speak?
I don't know if he has anything to say, but I think Bill Keller's on the line.
If you can ask John
Ask
to
Mr. Keller if he
unmute.
has anything
John,
else to
do
say.
you want to mute him?
I just, unmuted. Is this Bill Kelly? Yeah.
Hello, Bill.
You're unmuted now.
Can you turn it up?
It's as high as it goes.
Did you put the microphone on, maybe?
Good, this is, John LaBelle from the planning department. If you have anything you'd like to add, I believe you're unmuted now.
You're unmuted, he said. Yeah, can he hear you?
We can't hear him.
Bill, I don't think you're coming through very clearly.
I don't think he intended to speak, that's why he gave me that.
Right, that's my thought.
Do we have any other comments? Any other discussion?
And the vote will be on Thursday morning.
Good luck, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the,
Thank you.
The commissioners' meetings are on YouTube and you can watch
Yeah,
them live.
yeah.
So,
10 a.m.
Shannon, can we have an executive session prior to the next meeting?
I actually was going to, we don't have anything pressing. And we were wondering if you wanted to cancel the June. We actually don't have anything pressing for the June agenda because we have no subdivisions, land development plans. And we were wondering if you wanted to cancel the